Brigid, welcome. Thank you for being here. You're leaving the Robert Schuman Centre after 8 years of being our director at the European University Institute. But I looked at your biography. Before being our director, you were vice president of University College Dublin, UCD. You were the founding director of the Dublin European Institute at UCD. In March 2004, you were elected as a member of the Royal Irish Academy. In 2010, you got the medal for the Ordre National du Mérite of the French Republic. In 2014, you had the Lifetime Achievement for Contribution to European Studies, UACES. In November 2018, you were ranked among the women who shape Europe by POLITICO. You wrote and edited 11 books and more. There is much more in your career. So my first question to you is about your pretty amazing ability to combine being an excellent academic and also being a very charismatic and respected leader. How have you managed to combine these two otherwise rather divergent, I would say, dimensions of a career?
Well, I think it's probably accurate to say that I never intended to take on leadership positions in a university. I liked my own work, my students, my courses. I was very content doing what I was doing. But in 2004, UCD got a new president, and he was determined to reform UCD, so very major change. And he came to me and asked me would I be the founding dean of a new College of Human Sciences. And he said to me that my colleagues had suggested my name and would I think about it. So I thought about it for 24 hours and I thought, is this something that I feel I should do, could do and would contribute to? And I thought, very rarely in one's life does one have the opportunity not just to do one's own work, but to leave one's traces and a legacy in a university, institutionally. And for me, this was to ensure that the social sciences were as good as they possibly could be in UCD. So I saw this as a major challenge. I discovered when I took the post that I really enjoyed it, that I enjoyed engaging with all of the disciplines. There were 10 departments, that I enjoyed change, that I was good at ensuring that people would mostly support what we were doing. Not everyone, because of course in any institution there are people who won't support change because change is difficult. But I found that if I made a compelling case and I had a very strong team around me, that we managed to do very good things in the social sciences in UCD. And for me, I'm Irish. UCD is the largest Irish university. And so I'm very pleased that I had the opportunity for 6 years to work on what was a very major change program. And it also was the kind of challenge that suited me. So I'm not a good process person. I'm not someone who enjoys doing routines. I'm better at change management. And so this was a very exciting time, a very challenging time. And of course it ended. I also was dean during the Irish crash. So I also experienced the struggle to maintain my departments as our budgets were rapidly and very largely cut. So I look back on that time, I learned a lot. I learned that I was able to work with colleagues across disciplines, and so it was a very rich experience. Not an easy experience, but a very rich experience. I must say, in relation to my own work, by the time that deanship was over, I had nothing left. I had published any of the work that I still had coming into that deanship was now out. So I was essentially starting out in 2011 with a clean slate in terms of research. But it was also a very good time to start again because the EU was in crisis. It's my area of expertise. And so I was able to, in a sense, there was also, it was new again. So this was also very good. And then Schuman, Schuman is different in that, yes, we've changed a lot at Schuman, we've established new programs, but I've been able to stay much closer to academic work as Schuman director than I was as dean of a very large faculty.
Okay, thank you. So basically you reached several goals in your career at a time when it was still pretty difficult for a woman to go through this type of career. So my question to you is, did you have to fight harder than your male colleagues in order to achieve these goals? Was it difficult?
So firstly, I think it's probably important for me to say that I never had goals. I never decided I will be a professor. I just did what I did as a lecturer, as an associate professor, and then as a full professor. I just did the job. And so was it harder than for male colleagues? I suspect it must have been. Why do I say that? There were very few women professors in UCD in the 1990s. I still vividly recall going to my first academic council and almost stopping at the door because there was just tables of men, and I was one of maybe 4 out of 80. Wow. So it was very few. But interestingly, because I was a professor at a relatively young age in a country that was rapidly changing, I didn't ever experience barriers to advancement because by the time I became a professor, the universities wanted women, needed more women. I think what is much more difficult for women is that we do a lot of more service. So the university needed women on appointments boards, promotions boards, research committees, quality assurance committees. And so the few women that were there were called on to do much more heavy lifting in the institution. Also, in my experience, it matters how many women are around the table. And you must have a critical mass of women for women to be able to have an impact. But I must say, in UCD, on issues like promotions, when it became clear that women were not being promoted as rapidly as they should, then we ensured that the processes were changed and that the structural barriers were removed. But it's also demanding to have to do this. It shouldn't just be up to women to ensure that there is equality and more diversity in our institutions. It's for everyone.
Absolutely. But one of the difficulties that women in academia, as in many other sectors, have is still the difficulty to reconcile their career with their family life. So you have 3 children and you still manage to also have this brilliant career. How did you manage those difficult years, for example, when your kids were small, were little? How did you manage to find that balance?
So there are years of my life that seem a blur, and that was when I had young children and not much sleep. So on the other hand, I always wanted to be a mother. I was intent also on working. So it had to work because there was no alternative. I had a very supportive husband. My mother was also very supportive, and we always had people live at home. And I worked at home a lot when the children were young. I had a downstairs office in the basement. I think the one thing you learn as a working mother is prioritization. You become very good at knowing what the next most important thing to do is. Yes. Because if, for example, you go home and one of the children has a temperature, then you know, the doctor, etc., etc. So I think I developed, I'm not a particularly efficient person, but I'm very good at prioritization. And I took that into my work. I always thought at the beginning of every month, what are the most important things that must be done this month or this week? And I think that, in a way, allowed me to not spend time on stuff that was less important. So I think, and I also enjoyed my children when they were very young. They're now adults. I still enjoy them greatly. And I would never regret trying to combine. I think it's also important to say that it's not just for women to combine. It's also a question of family policy. And I think slowly, but very slowly, our institutions are now beginning to think about not just the individual employee, but also the wider family. And families are now very diverse. And so it's really important that institutions are supportive of families and not just of individual employees.
Would you say that compared to the beginning of your career, over, let's say, the last 2 decades, the situation for women in academia has changed, improved? What have you observed?
So there are now more women in academia. There's a much stronger pipeline of women doing PhDs than postdocs. I think there still are, what we see is that at certain stages of the career life cycle, and particularly when women have young children, it's tougher, and therefore I think again on promotions, all of that has to be taken into account and the clock has to be stopped. So things have improved. There are now more women. There are now more senior women. But there's still, given the pipeline, the fact that there are as many women doing doctorates, then as you go up the hierarchy, I think we still see the phenomenon of the higher, the fewer. Yeah. So have things changed? Absolutely. But if I were an early career scholar today, as a woman, but not just women, I think people from either socioeconomic backgrounds that are not that supportive, or ethnic minorities, I think there still are barriers. There still are barriers. But are things better now? Yes. I think I would have both experienced and observed in my time overt barriers, in the sense of senior men saying things or doing things that were simply inappropriate or illegal. That happens less now. But of course, culture changes on a much slower time frame than formal legal requirements. And that's where I think we still need a lot of work. Yeah, on the culture. On the cultural change.
Indeed. So my last question to you, Brigid, is about a message that you would like to give to your colleagues, both men and women, a message on, the situation for women in academia and, what change could be done further to improve the situation.
So I think I should begin by saying that I think being an academic is a very privileged thing, because one gets to work on what one is interested in. You wake up in the morning and you think, what am I interested in? And you have the absolute freedom to work on questions and issues that you see as important. And that's a very rare thing. It's demanding, but very rewarding to constantly know that there are other questions that can be asked. So I think the first thing I would say is that we should appreciate the life of being an academic. I also have always greatly valued all my life the renewal that comes in a university every year. I always remember Septembers with excitement to see all the next crop of students coming in, the new lives that are coming to university. So I think we're very privileged. In terms of women, but I think also other demands of diversity. I think that it's not just good enough for an institution to say that this is a priority. An institution should be judged by what it does. And that means that one has to be attentive to the pipeline. So there must be a sufficient number of women coming through to senior positions, but also on all the deliberative bodies, on, for example, at the EUI, on executive. There must be not just 1 or 2 women, but 4 or 5 women. Because unless you have a significant number, a critical mass, then the 1 or 2 women are the ones who carry the burden. And it's also, the deliberation is different. The more women around the table, the more the perspective that they bring is heard. Because I think that if you have for example, an executive that's largely male, then that impacts on the quality of deliberation and on what is the focus, what attention is paid to. And then I think the EUI, we have certain challenges in this area because in my experience, men are more likely to move and to move their families at whatever ages than women are. I know this from talking to a lot of women and asking them would they apply for chairs. And it's not that they don't want to come to the EUI, it's just it doesn't fit just now. So I think it requires constant vigilance, constant effort, and there should be no regression. That the EUI has got to be a place that is a home to reflects the societies we now live in all of their diversity. And that, I think, remains a challenge for the EUI.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Brigid, and thank you for being with us for 8 years. We are very grateful to have you had as a director, and we are looking forward to still seeing you here visiting.
Well, I have to say that I have regarded being director of Schuman as a gift. It has been a wonderful 8 years. I've worked with marvellous people, and we've done very good things.
Thank you.